March 23rd, 1999, and we're in the Adams Center for Teaching Excellence, interviewing Mr. Fred Sadler. Is that correct?
Sudler.
Sudler. It's a U. Fred Sudler, who was in the 23rd Tank Battalion Headquarters Company, and he is here with his son visiting us today, and we're going to get our interview started now. If you would tell us, start out with your childhood life, where you were born, your parents' names, and what life was like for you growing up before the war.
I was born in Rushville, Indiana on November 25th, 1924. My parents are Fred William Sudler Sr. and Lucille Gallimore Sudler. I moved to Akron, Ohio, 1925, and I went to a grade school at Heminger Grade School in Akron, Ohio. I graduated in 1939 at Heminger and started to go to Kenmore High School in Akron, Ohio. I went there for 2 years, and we moved to Connersville, Indiana, where I went to Connersville Senior High School for 2 years and graduated in 1943. While I was at Connersville High School, I was playing basketball on December 27th, 1941 with my cousins in the back alley, when a girl that I knew come out and told us, "Hey guys, we've been bombed at Pearl Harbor by the Japanese." So that ended the basketball game. We went home and we listened all day to the reports of the Pearl Harbor Day. So being a faithful citizen of the United States, I went, and as soon as I was 18 years old, I enlisted in the United States Air Force and went up to Lafayette, Indiana, and took educational exam to see if I had enough brains to be a pilot in the Air Force. I passed that, but unfortunately I didn't pass the physical. My eyesight was not good enough. So I had to wait till I got drafted. When I was graduated from high school in Connersville, Indiana in 1943, I was also handed not only a diploma, but a request from the United States Army to come into the Army. So from then I went to Fort Benjamin Harrison in Indianapolis, Indiana. And while we were processed in Indianapolis, Indiana at Fort Bend, we were put on a train and sent to Riverside, California, at a camp called Camp Hahn, which was across the road from March Field. We were an anti-aircraft battalion, and that's the reason why we were across from March Field. So I stayed there till about October of 1943, and I was given the privilege of entering into the Army Specialized Training Program. So I was sent to Compton, California to be processed to go into the program. From there I was sent to New Mexico A&M at Las Cruces, New Mexico, in which I began my training for the ASTP program. And I was there till about March of 1943 when they stopped the program, and along with other ASTP people, we were transferred to Camp Barkley, Texas, where the 12th Armored Division was stationed. It seems that the 43rd Tank Battalion had been sent to the Philippines, and they had to replenish their manpower, so we were the people who were going to replace the manpower that they needed. And what else do we need to know?
Could you tell me, just to back up just a little bit, how did you feel personally when you heard about the news of Pearl Harbor and knowing that the United States was going to war and that you were at that age where they looked to draft people into service? How did you feel about that personally? Tell me kind of maybe how your parents reacted to you wanting to join the Air Force and then not being able to, but then later being drafted into the Army. And also, after you cover that, could you describe more what the ASTP program was all about? Like, what was special about that? If you could cover those, that would be good.
Well, when we learned about the bombing of Pearl Harbor, most sons were wanting to go into the service, and most parents were appreciative. They realized that this was a patriotic duty to do. And of course, my father, he was in World War I, which we'll get into that later on. But they were sorry that I couldn't get into the Air Force because they said if you were going to fight a war, you might as well go where you want to go. So when we got drafted, there wasn't nothing troublesome about that. Of course, Mother got sad when we shipped off to California. And what else was we wanted to know about? Oh, the ASTP program.
Describe that program to us and why that was significant.
Well, it was an opportunity to get an education, and probably an opportunity to have maybe a career in the Army. And most of it was for engineering, some type of engineering in the United States Army. But with the crisis growing greater and the need for more troops over in Europe, they had to cancel it and use us guys to go over to Europe to win the war over in Europe. I want to say one thing. I feel very fortunate that I was able to fight over in Europe, because I would have not liked to have fought in the Pacific, because that was an awful, awful bad battle. And I'm glad that I didn't have to go there.
How did you and your friends in the ASTP program, how did y'all feel when you learned that the program was being shut down and that it wasn't going to work out like you had expected whenever you had entered that particular program?
Well, we were disappointed, but we kind of expected it, because we knew that things were getting more severe over in Europe, and we knew that they were going to have more people over there. And this was when D-Day had come. We were sent over there shortly after D-Day. So the troops that were already in England was sent over during D-Day, so they had to replenish the troops that they lost while they went into Europe at first part of the invasion of Europe. So that was that contingent that had to go over there and replace them.
Okay. Can you tell me, you went from ASTP and then they moved you to Barclay, Camp Barclay?
Camp Barclay.
Okay. Can you tell me about arriving at Camp Barclay, your initial impressions of Abilene and the area around Abilene? And talk to me about your training at Barclay. How did you, as an ASTP, a former ASTP student, how did you fit in with the rest of the guys that had already kind of been at Camp Campbell and through Tennessee maneuvers? How did the ASTP guys fit in with the rest of the guys? And what kind of training things did you experience at Camp Barclay? Tell me about your training officers, that kind of thing.
Well, when we arrived at Camp Barclay, we didn't know a thing about the Army Division. So we got teased a lot. They called us the quiz kids, the whiz kids. So our primary task was to familiarize ourselves with the Armored Division. So we were taught to fire the rifle, fire the weapons we were supposed to fire, and we had to learn to drive each vehicle. We had to learn how to drive the tanks, the half-tracks, and trucks. And this primarily was the main theme that they had with us. So most of our training was to familiarize ourselves with what we needed to do while we were being Armored Division personnel. And of course we had to learn the structure of the 12th Armored Division, how we had 3 combat commands. We had Combat Command A, Combat Command B, and Combat Command C. So after we had went through our training and they felt like we were qualified, we were sent down to Camp Bowie, Texas for another exercise in war. I think there was an infantry division down there we had a exercise in war with. Then after we got that, we come back to Camp Barkley, and they all gave us furloughs. So we had a 10-day furlough, and I was on furlough when D-Day happened on June 6, 1944. And as soon as we got back from furlough, we were sent to Camp Shanks, New York, to be shipped overseas. So in September, I think the 20th, we left Camp Shanks to be shipped overseas. And on October the 2nd, we landed in England, and we were sent to a old armor division barracks called Tisworth Barracks in England, and that's up close to Salisbury, England. And it was interesting being there. And we were there for, I think, maybe a month. And then we got an assignment to go over to Europe. We left Southampton, England, and landed at Le Havre, England. And that was a miserable landing. First, we got there, it was cold, windy, and raining. And we had to bivouac after we got off the boat. And we bivouacked and pitched our tent, and it was blowing and raining, and it kept blowing down. And my partner and I, his name was Robin Miller, I believe it was. And we kept putting the tent back up, and it'd blow down. Put the tent back up, it'd blow down. Put the tent back up, it'd blow down. Finally, we said, nuts to it. We ain't going to do it anymore. And also, while we were bivouacked there, we had our guards was stationed at night. And we woke up with somebody saying, "Halt! Halt! Halt! Bam, 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 bam!" About scared us to death, and we thought we were going to get shot. It was a dog that had come into our bivouac area. So after that, after we went to our bivouac area, we were moved to Luneville, France, which was our division marshalling point. And our division was assigned its task of what it was supposed to do in Europe.
Okay. Can you tell me what that mission was, or how they described it to you, or did they describe it to you? What did y'all know about it?
Well, we were assigned to the 7th Army, which General Patch was the commanding general of it. And our basic assignment was to secure the Alsace-Lorraine area in France and move from then into defeating the German army so we could go into Germany. And in the Alsace-Lorraine area, it come to me that here I'm a 19-year-old son of a 19-year-old man that fought in 1917 and 18 in the same area that I am, here by Metz, France, and Nancy, France. And it was a real shock to know that here I was where my father was about 27 years ago. And we had several battles there. One of them was the Herlesheim battle, another was the Colmar battle, in which the German army, after they had been defeated up in the Battle of the Bulge, they tried to break through down there. And we were met by the elite of the German army, the SS Panzer divisions. And they hated us. Because every time we come at them, we fixed them. They couldn't beat us. And we kept pushing on, and I don't know, it just seemed like that when we started into engaging in battle, it was a continued move here, move here, move here. You really didn't know what you were doing until after the war was over, what we were doing, but it was constant move, move, move. And when we ended up, we were down one of our assignment was go to the Berchtesgaden, Hitler's redoubt, and we found out he wasn't there. So from there we were going down to Innsbruck, Austria, to seal the pass from Austria into Italy, to keep the German army from coming up. And then that's when the war ended.
Can we back up just a little bit to where, as you started in Europe, can you tell me about some feelings that you had? Like, I know the beginning of the war is one thing, but getting ready to move from England into France in the actual theater of operations, the actual combat zone. Tell me how you, as a young man, a 19-year-old, going into the same place where your father had fought before, can you tell me about the different feelings that you had and your emotions, how you and the people you knew in the battalion, your close buddies, what were the thoughts you were having? Did y'all talk about it? And how did your relationship with your father develop in that? Did y'all talk about it, knowing that he had been there before? Or did you have a chance to talk about it? Did you have a chance to correspond with him as you were just starting into France and combat?
Well, as we were moving down to Looneyville, we observed how much of a battle had been going on. Is where the battles had been going. You've seen wrecked half tracks, wrecked vehicles. You saw where the war damage had been done. And the closer we got to the battle area, you could hear it sounded like thunder in the foreground. And you realize, hey, listen, this is a real thing. We're getting to some place where we're going to be shot at and we're going to start shooting too. So when we got down to the Alsace-Lorraine area, we didn't think much about anything except what we were supposed to do. And then when we got to Metz, France, and Nancy, France, I told my guys, hey guys, my dad was here in World War I. They said, is that right? I said, isn't that ironic that we were doing this, the same thing? And it was like you were reliving history again. Here was American Expeditionary Force, and this was their assignment to defend and attack the Germans in the Alsace-Lorraine area. They weren't there any other place in World War I. This was where they were at. And we just felt like we was part of World War I. We just finished a job that they didn't get done. And all of us were apprehensive about battle. We didn't know what to expect. And when it really hits you is when your first casualties come across. When we lost our battalion commander, who was killed before he ever had time to fire a shot. You realize that, hey, this is a real thing. You hate to lose your friends. And I remember the first time I saw a dead German. He was a young fella, probably about my age, and he was knelt in sort of like prayer, and he was dead. And it come to me as what a dumb thing we're doing. Here we are trying to kill each other. Young men trying to kill each other. But then when we come upon the concentration camps and saw the dastardly deeds that the Nazis done to these people, we realized why we were over there. We were over there to defeat a dastardly enemy. And don't ever think the German people are innocent on this. They knew what was going on. But they didn't have the guts to stop it. And we had to go over there and defeat an army that had no more respect for common life than they would for a little dog. So that made us realize why we were over there fighting. We were over there to defeat this enemy that did have no more respect for life or people, and all they could think is kill, kill, kill.
I forget what his rank was. Was he Lieutenant Colonel Miggs when he was killed?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you describe Lieutenant Colonel Meigs to us? Did you have an opportunity to interact with him any? Just because he was such a prominent figure and such an early casualty in the 12th Armored's experience, and particularly the 23rd, can you tell us about him and how the rest of the men in your battalion felt about him as a commander, and how his death, how losing him so early in combat, how that affected the entire battalion?
Well, Lieutenant Colonel Meigs was a West Pointer. He's a very disciplined man, and we all respected him. If we were going to have to go into battle, we would have we would want him to be our leader, because we have all the confidence in the world that he would lead us through battle in a way that we should. And we had a lot of respect for him. And when we lost him, I don't know, it seemed like we lost some of our heart. We really hated to see him go. But we didn't know what we were going to have afterwards. We still missed him all during the war. We wished we could have had him lead us, because he was a well-respected man, and he was a strict disciplinarian. And if you're going to be in war, you better be a strict disciplinarian. You better make sure that your troops do what you're supposed to do, when they're supposed to do it, and where they're supposed to do it. And every command is followed to the strict letter of the law. And that's the only way you can win battles. And we had that kind of confidence in him.
Can you describe to me, where was your first actual engagement where you participated in any fighting, where the 23rd was really involved? And describe to me what exactly happened that immersed y'all into actual combat experience. And after that was over, did y'all have time to reflect on it? How did you feel about how you had done, and those kinds of earliest feelings about actual combat?
Well, when we first were sent into combat, this was when Lieutenant Colonel Meigs was killed. We had a mission to attack a German enforcements in this area around, I forget where it was at. And I don't remember what we did, but about that time this is about the time that they started a counterattack down there in what they call the Colmar Pocket. And incidentally, the Colmar Pocket was where Audie Murphy earned his Medal of Honor. And we had a fire mission. Our mortar platoon had a fire mission, and this fire mission, we fired our mortars so hard that our base plate was buried into the ground, and we had to dig them out. And there was one incident that we were firing our mortars, and we had a counterattack from a tank company of SSers hit our half-track and knocked it out. Well, as they was coming up and attacking us, I saw this foxhole and I jumped into it, and I didn't realize there was water in it, but there was water in it. And by them hitting this half-track, they caused a smoke signal to come up, which hid them from me, and our half-tracks was getting away, and I started running toward the half-track. And just as I got to the half-track, climbed over the back of it, I heard a pep, 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 and it was a burp gun that was firing at me, and I jumped over the top of it, and these bullets hit this base plate of the mortar. And boy, was I scared, and I felt like I was lucky. But most of us, during battle, you're not really scared. You just do what you have to do, and then afterwards you ponder about, boy, what happened there? How did we get out of that? Did we do the right thing? And you always hate to see somebody get shot. You always hate to see some of your friends get hurt. You still think about them to this day. You realize how you were able to come back home, raise a family, and though they didn't have a chance to do that. Like our commanding colonel. He died before his son was born, and he never got to know his son. And you realize how lucky you were when you got to raise your own family and be able to be with them, and knowing that here's friends that you lived with, you associated with, you went to college with an ASTP program. They never got to get that. And it makes you sad. It makes you feel sad. You never forget them. You always know them while they were young. They never had a chance to grow old like I have. It's a sad thing to know that. Those are the real heroes of the war. The guys that didn't come back. Whether it be in the Pacific or the European theater of operations, or for that matter of fact, any war we were in, the Korean, Vietnam War, or the Gulf War, the people that didn't have to come back, they're the heroes, the ones who gave their life for our nation. You never forget them. You'll always honor them in your memory.
Can you walk us through your war experience from that first engagement up until Herlisheim, and talk about where you went through northern France and what some of your missions were, events leading up to Herlisheim that are memorable, and then talk to us about Herlisheim, and that was, you know, one of the really most significant engagements that y'all are in, and tell us about that as well. But first, could you start out with just between that initial engagement and Herlisheim, what are some things that happened along the way, or what did anything happen along the way, and then get us into the Herlisheim story?
Well, while we were committed to battling the German army, we were given different assignments to go to different places. Our primary task was to seek out the enemy and engage him in battle. Well, during the Herlisheim battle, this is when they engaged us. They tried to break through and defeat us. And we took a beating there, but we didn't lose. We won the battle, and we drove them away. And of course, they were trying to keep us from going into Germany. And they were trying, their objective was trying to capture Strasbourg. And our objective was to keep them from taking it. So we defeated their best efforts to come through. And once we did that, and then we went on the initiative, and we just constantly was going after them, continually, making them to move back, so that we could go in and get into Germany and continue to keep on the move. And our objective was to keep engaging the enemy wherever we found them. We always had contact with the enemy. And our airplanes and our radios was broadcast to all the German cities. As long as you had a white flag out, we would not bother you. We'd go right on through. So we had a recon patrols always ahead of our columns. And as long as they were not harmed, we would go through. But unfortunately, once in a while, with the white flags out, they started to shoot at us. And they killed some recon people. So we had to go around and shoot. Well, we had to tear this town up to make them stop shooting at us. And but basically, this is what we were doing, on the move, constantly on the move. And it was a cold winter in Europe at that time, and these armored vehicles are really cold. They're not very warm. We had trouble with our feet. We were getting frostbitten. I remember when we got down to Kurstheim, Austria at the end of the war, this family here at this house that we were at brought us out half a glass of wine and tea. And we were chilled to the bone, but boy, did that make you feel warm. You could just feel yourself warming up. The biggest thing about the war was the discomfort you had, the weather you had to fight through, the snow, the cold. And of course the bullets flying. That's why I don't care to go camping. I had enough of that when I was in the Army. I don't like roughing it. I had that roughness, no fun. But basically that's what battle is like. You go out and you're roughing with the nature and roughing with an enemy that's out to get you, and we're out to get them. It's not a pleasant experience.
Was a really difficult battle for several of the battalions in the 12th Army.
We lost a lot of tank people there.
Yeah. Tell me what the 23rd's role in that particular engagement was.
Matter of fact, we lost so many people in the Herrlisheim battle that the first sergeant come around, and they were asking the AST people if they wanted to commission. And the first sergeant asked me if I wanted to commission. I said, no, I'm not qualified to lead people into battle. And one of my friends did. He took it. But they were that hard up for officers. They come around for volunteers. And since we had high IQs, you had to have an IQ of 110 or better to be in the ASTP program. They figured that these people were people that could lead people. And that's where they tried to get their officers' strength back up, by coming to the AST people and trying to get them replaced by them. So that was how bad the battle was. We were losing leadership in that battle, and they had to replace them. But once the battle was over, and we defeated the German attack at Colmar, we went on the initiative. It was just a constant move and engage the enemy, move and engage the enemy. And there was one time we were in Austria, the 23rd Tank Battalion, we were under Combat Command R, went up to a castle in Austria, and they engaged some SS troopers. And the SS troopers were hated so much by some of the regular German army that we gave the German army some guns to fight their SS troopers. And in this castle there was some a prime minister from France. There were some high political leaders. We got a Polish general named Rommel was relieved from captivity there. And while the battle was going on, there was a force was going up across here, and we were sent back. My squad was sent back to defend a bridge that our tank battalion had went across to engage the enemy at this castle. And as the battle was going on up by this castle, the German army was coming down through this woods, and as they come down with a white flag, and they would come down to us, and we would search them and get rid of their arms, and we told them to go on up to the road to where our MPs would be, and they would be taken care of. We caught a lot of prisoners that just gave themselves up. They come down, and they were getting away from the battle. But the SS weren't giving up. We had to kill them. They were fighting back.
After Colmar, I believe y'all were moved north, most of the 12th Armored, and moved into the 3rd Army, I believe, under Patton.
There was a short, maybe a week or so, we were assigned to the 3rd Army. I don't really know why, but we did. And we went back, well, let's see, I guess after we crossed into Germany, we went back to the 7th Army. And during that time, the Free French Army would join with us. And they come along and we fought along with them. They was a bunch of guys that were just about, some of them were still in civilian uniforms and they were fighting. Boy, they hated the French, they hated the Germans.
What was that like, getting to know some of the French soldiers and fighting next to them? Did you have a chance to interact much? Do you remember anything about that?
Oh, they were glad to see us. They were glad we were over there. And sure, we interacted. They was glad that we come over and help them out. We give them whatever they needed. They didn't have much, but we supplied them with what they could have. And they were glad to get back into the battle. They was tired of being a conquered nation. They were winning their country back. And they were glad we were over there helping them win their country back.
To drift back to Herlisheim for a moment, you mentioned how there were so many officers were lost that they came around offering commissions to people that would volunteer. At that same time, quite a number of replacement troops were brought in as well.
Oh yeah,
to bring
yeah.
the division back up to strength. How were the replacement soldiers received by the men of the division in your battalion who had already been in combat and were more seasoned? How did y'all react towards these new guys that were coming in to replace close friends that had been lost? And maybe as a former ASTP student who came into Barclay later than some of the other guys in the division, what was your perspective? Was it a little different than the rest of the guys?
I'm glad you asked that, because most of these kids that was coming in, and I call them kids, and I'm 19-year-old, but they were young. They were fresh drafted, and they were coming in here. You kind of took them under the wing. We were now experienced battle, had battle experience. Here was a bunch of young guys coming in and replacing the people we lost. We kind of put them under our wing, try to help them to get adapted to the warfare. We kind of felt sorry for them that They didn't know what it was like. And they were young. They were about a year younger than we were. Matter of fact, we had one fella that he was a young blonde-headed guy, and he spoke German real well. And boy, did that help us out. Whenever we went into a village and stopped, we'd always send him out to find some food for us. And he was speaking German well. So we used him as an interpreter for us. There were times we drove around in our half-track with a ham over the side of it, and if we had the chance to stop at night, we would, instead of getting sleep, we would fix us some ham and eggs. We'd send him out hunting us some eggs. We'd fix us some ham and eggs. That was probably the fun part of the war, if there is any fun part.
Were there any other fun memories or events, or maybe some things that were a little humorous that happened when you weren't in combat and it was just the guys that you were getting to know so well and that were such good friends? Can you share some more of those fun memories with us that maybe you experienced?
Yeah, well, after the war was over, we were given occupation duty around Augsburg, Germany. And at that time, there was what they call displaced persons. There were a bunch of people that had been brought from other countries into Germany, and they were trying to gather them together and ship them back to where they belonged. And we were having trouble with riots and fights that were breaking out, and we had to run patrols trying to keep it calmed down. So we were out on a patrol one night, and our driver on the Jeep had been drinking, and we were going down the road, and all of a sudden he lost control of the Jeep, and we rolled over in the road and ended up with the Jeep on top of him. And I got out, and I thought, my gosh, you go through battle and get killed in something like this? Well, this is actually what happened to Patton. He went through battle and got killed in a wreck. But the occupation duty was keeping some form of discipline in the disorganized units that was around you. The Germans were disorganized. They had no control over themselves, and we had to make sure there was control around wherever we were at. So we had to keep control there. It was a job that you had to do.
How did the German people react to you in occupation? And even before that, you mentioned how the Allied signals were broadcast in German towns and talking about the white sheets, and if they had those out, then y'all wouldn't engage them, and y'all just roll right through the town or whatever. How did the majority of Germans, or maybe not the majority, but how did the Germans react to y'all as you came through their towns? Did you interact with them any, or did you just stay in the vehicles and keep rolling? Did you have a chance to interact at all?
Well, after the war was over, there was strictly forbidden any fraternization. But you know how people are. They don't always obey the rules. And this is where this young replacement guy come in handy. He spoke good German. Most of the German people was glad the war was over. They had taken a beating. But I'm not so sure that they were glad we won. I think they were just glad it was all over with. And I got to say one thing about it. America is a grateful nation, and if it hadn't been for the Marshall Plan, Europe wouldn't be in the shape it is now. People might say what they want to about the United States of America, but we not only conquered an enemy, but we helped rebuild them. We rebuilt Japan, we helped rebuild Europe, and we have rebuilt civilization as we know it today. And I don't know of any place in history where you saw a conquering nation rebuild an enemy. Because usually they took advantage of the enemy. And through the history of warfare, usually the people that were conquered become slaves of the conqueror. But that wasn't the effect of World War II. The Marshall Plan rebuilt Europe, and MacArthur took over in Japan and rebuilt Japan. So it was a process of rebuilding a destroyed enemy. And that was the one good thing about the war. There was no slaves taken out of the war. Everybody was tired of the war, and they tried to rebuild a conquered nation. And I don't think in the history of civilization has there been anything like that, where the conqueror rebuilt the conquered.
After you were moved north and you were in the Third Army for a few days, they moved you back south, and you're back under the Seventh Army, correct? Tell me what happened from that point as y'all moved deeper into Germany. Were there any big engagements? I know you were moving a lot and moving quickly. What was combat like during that point? Was it really combat? And what kinds of things did you experience in the 23rd?
Well, most of it was just minor skirmishes of picking up pockets of resistance, because the German army was basically defeated as an organized unit. And the only time that we had any trouble was when we would meet with the SS Panzer divisions, and that's where we had trouble. But the actual army itself, whenever we had skirmishes with it, no problem, they would give up fast rather than fight. And as we engaged them, they would give up, and we kept moving from town to town to town until we come into I guess whenever we met the SS group, we would have a battle. But most of it was just skirmishes, and as soon as we engaged the enemy, they would give up. They give up by masses of, and throw up their arms, and you just send them on, walk back to wherever they had to go. They were ready to give up. But there were some fanatic Germans that wanted to fight to the end.
How did you feel and your buddies feel? How did y'all react during this time when you knew that, as you said, the German army as a unit had been defeated and it was just pockets of resistance? How did you feel being able to move so quickly and having so many people surrendering and just sending them back down the line, just walking with their hands up? How did you guys feel knowing that this was the case and it was, it wasn't really big battles anymore, but yet the war wasn't over? Germany hadn't surrendered, how did that affect y'all? Were y'all frustrated, or were you just happy that it was easier now?
No, we were happy weren't having any severe skirmishes. We knew the war was over. It was just a matter of when. And we kept moving and kept moving. And every time we would see the least amount of resistance, we would be glad. We was glad we didn't have to kill anymore. We was glad we didn't have to fire our guns. We were glad that they were giving up. And then when finally it come up and finally the war was over with, we were real glad it was over with. We were glad for them, we were glad for ourselves. There was probably a period of about maybe 3 or 4 weeks and we never fired a gun. Probably the last major battle was when we went to this town in Austria, this castle, and we had to fight the SS that was in charge of the prisoners of war in this castle. That was probably the last major battle. And that wasn't much of a battle because they couldn't fight us. We had them overwhelmed. But it was just their fanaticism that they had. Now those are the same people who killed the people in the concentration camps too. There was a certain group of Germans that were bound and determined to destroy whatever they could destroy.
I want to talk about both those things that you mentioned just now, the castle and also concentration camps. Can you, like, castle rescue is kind of a romantic, impressive notion, but then you referred to it saying that it wasn't really much of a battle because the Germans were so overwhelmed. But we haven't really gotten any good accounts of what exactly happened. How did y'all know that this castle was a place where the Germans were? And you mentioned, and we have a list of, the French notables and the other distinguished people that were being held there as prisoners. Can you give us some details about that engagement and how y'all...
There was a German officer captured in our engaging the enemy as they were giving up. And he informed our people that there was a castle that held these people. So this is when, I forget what company of the 23rd Tank Battalion went down there and said they rushed over there to rescue the captives because they heard that the SS were going to kill them. So we learned this from an officer that was in the regular army, the Wehrmacht, what they call the Wehrmacht. And he told them, listen, there's some SS people up there going to kill some hostages, and you better get up there and save them. And this is what happened.
Do you happen to have any idea of who this German officer was?
No, I didn't even know it.
And what were the stories from the guys in the 23rd who actually participated in the engagement? Did you hear any accounts of what actually went on at the castle? Or
no, I didn't hear anything at all. Like I say, we were guarding the bridge there, and while the battle was going on, the regular German army, the Wehrmacht, was coming through this force and coming down to us, surrendering. So all we did was take away their weapons and send them on down the road. They didn't offer at all. Matter of fact, they were glad it was over with. They didn't have to fight anymore.
You mentioned the relationship between the regular German army, the Wehrmacht, and then the SS troopers, and how they didn't get along. Do you have any insights into that relationship and why they didn't like each other? Is there anything you can tell us about that? Like why this German officer would inform your troops, the Allied troops, that this was going on in the castle and that the SS was going to execute these prisoners?
Well, the philosophy of the SS: destroy what is not with you. If you didn't believe what they believed, you were in trouble. And the regular army, the Wehrmacht, knew this. And they knew the war was over with. And they didn't want them to make them fight. But the SS, they would kill their own people. And that's the reason why this German officer in the Wehrmacht told us they wanted to stop a foolish killing of hostages is what it was. It's what it amounted to. And most of these concentration camps were run by SS troopers. They had no qualms in killing people. And the regular army, they were just like our army. They were just men who were in the army and they were following the rules, but they didn't believe in killing innocent people. And they didn't like that. I guess in the German philosophy, there was two types of people: the regular people and the fanatics. And the ones that we engaged in most of the battles was with fanatics. And those are the ones that we had to defeat the most. The Hitlers, the Himmlers, the Goerings, the ones that were bound and determined to destroy other countries for their own profit. That's what happens to people when they lose control of their government. They let dictators run them. We see that now over in Iran. See Saddam Hussein doing the same thing that Hitler did with killing his own people to stay in power.
You mentioned the concentration camps a few times, and of course, when people think about World War II, usually the first thing they think about, is the Jews and the concentration camps and the final solution. As someone that was actually in Europe and in France and Germany at this time, tell me about your perspective on the concentration camps. I know part of the 12th, I don't remember which units, went through Landsberg, which was a satellite of Dachau. Tell me about any contact you had with the camps or any other soldiers that you knew that had been there and told stories. What was your perspective, and what can you give us as someone that was actually there?
Well, see, we didn't know what was going on. We didn't know that that was going on until we saw it. And we were shocked. We were shocked to find this. How could this ever happen? And how long had it happened? And where was it happening in other places? Like I told you, I saw this young German soldier dead. And I thought, well, what stupid thing is it? War is stupid. Here we are killing each other. Why? When we saw the concentration camps, we realized why. Why we had to win this war. We were shocked. We had no inkling this was going on. I don't know if our government knew it was going on. They didn't tell us it was going on. They gave us training film about why we're fighting, but they didn't show the concentration camps. We were just fighting a nation that was out to conquer other nations, but they didn't show us about the concentration camps. We didn't know it until we found them. We didn't know it was going on. We were shocked. We didn't realize that people could do that to people. Cause we didn't get to stay around and see much of it. We just deliberated and we just went on to do our job. Thank God we didn't have to do it. But all of us were shocked to realize that this was going on. And we didn't realize how long it was going on or where it was all going on. And even, well, like I say, we didn't know much about what was going on in the war until after the war was over with. Then you got stories coming back from different parts of Germany where these other concentration camps, where these gas ovens were, where they're gassing people, incinerators. We didn't know about that. And there's people here that probably today that don't believe the Holocaust ever happened. But it did. In my deepest mind, I don't see how anybody can do that. I don't see how anybody can hate anybody that much just to slaughter innocent people. The Japanese were just as bad.
When y'all came into contact with these concentration camps and learned these things that you hadn't known before, you mentioned being shocked because y'all weren't aware of it and no one had told you and you didn't know it was happening. What happened inside those of you that had been fighting and had seen Lieutenant Colonel Meigs die and that had fought so hard at Herlisheim? And what happened to you inside you? Did you feel better about the kinds of things that you had to participate in? How did that affect you and your perspective of how you viewed yourself in the war?
Well, after seeing this happen, then you realized you had to do whatever you could, as fast as you could, put an end to this war, wherever, whenever. So we more or less intensified our efforts to engage the enemy whenever we could, so we could defeat them and stop this. So we just kept intensifying our effort to defeat the enemy. Just keep going. And it made us want to finish it. And it really put a meaning to our effort, why we were fighting an enemy that would allow things like this to happen.
Are there any other significant memories or stories that you can recall from your war experience that I haven't asked you about or that we haven't had a chance to talk about yet?
No, not really. Not really. I think this is about all.
At the end of the war, when it was announced announced that Germany had surrendered, how did the guys in the Army that were in the 23rd, how did y'all feel? I mean, I'm sure y'all were a bit relieved that it was finally over because you knew that the Germans were defeated and you knew that, it was just a matter of time. But then when you finally got the news that it was official, how did that affect y'all?
Well, we wondered what are we going to do? Now we're going over to Japan. That was one of the thoughts. And when we finally left Austria and we went back to Augsburg, and realized that our mission was to do occupational duty. So the next thing he was wondering, well, when are we going to get out of the Army? They had a point system going. You got a point for so many months you were in the service. You got a point for so many months you were in combat. And I forget how many points you had to have before you get to go back home. So all we was wondering, when are we going to go home? But that was the main thing in our head. When are we going to get to go home? We knew the point system was there. Some of us didn't have enough points. But finally we had enough points to go home. That was our main concern. When are we going home? When are we going to go back home? Everybody was thinking that. When are we going home? There's no use of fighting anymore. Let's go home. Let's go home. We got the job done. But that was our main concern. It really was. See, the war ended in May. And in January 46, I was in Marseille, France, getting ready to sail back home to America. On February 4th of 1946, I was discharged from the Army. And about every other session we had with the Army, through processing our records and things, they would ask you to join the reserves. And I told them, no, I've had enough. 3 years is enough. And I'm glad I didn't, because a lot of the guys who was in the reserves ended up in Korea. Had I had taken that commission that they offered me, I might have been in Korea. Because as I understand it, if you become an officer in the Army, after so many for so many years after your discharge, you're under officer reserve. So you're subject to call up right now. So I said, no, I didn't want to be in the Army no more. I've had enough. As far as I was concerned, it was over with. No, after the war was over, everybody was wondering, when are we going home? When are we going home?
Well, tell us a little bit about what you did after the war. After you did finally get to go home, what was your life like? What did you do for a career? When did you start your family? That sort of thing.
Well, we started a family, went back to work where I worked at, and I felt like I had a call to the ministry. And I went to Indiana Central College in 1954, I think it was, to study for the ministry. And I studied there for about 3 years until I had a heart attack and had to give it up. But my wife and I had 5 children. We've got 14 grandchildren and 6 great-grandchildren. We enjoy them all, love them all. And knowing this, still think about the ones you lost. They never had that, never had that opportunity that I've had. I'll never forget it. Can we end this?